What's up, everybody? Welcome back. It's Brandon with Campbell Fitness, and today what we're going to do is take a short look at a presentation on determining macros for cutting. The reason being, as we all know, the weather is starting to turn, and we're all starting to end our bulks, and we want to look at dropping some of that fat and showing off that hard-earned muscle that we've spent the last couple of months adding. So let's take a look at how we're going to determine the macros for our cuts going forward. Now, first things first, where do we start? The basic thing we need to do first of all is find out what our caloric goals are. So what we're going to want to make sure is that we're actually going to be in a caloric deficit. Now, as a general rule of thumb, I'm going to associate a caloric deficit with losing weight and a caloric surplus with gaining weight. Now, there's always the argument of can you gain muscle while losing fat? I don't want to get into that here, but for general purposes, in order to lose weight, or fat in this case, we're going to have to look at a caloric deficit. So, how much of a deficit? If you've done any kind of dieting before, most people will recommend that you go into a 500 caloric deficit. Now, this is the general rule of thumb that we'll be using for this as well. Now, what we want to do with this is we want to maximize fat loss. So obviously, this is our key goal. However, when determining our macronutrients too, we also want to ensure that we minimize strength and muscle loss. So in order to do this, we want to try to keep this as simple as possible because a lot of these things can get overcomplicated and it just ends up stressing us out in the long run. So that being said, let's think about where we want to go with this cut exactly, because all too often what happens is people who go on cuts or diets just all of a sudden stop eating as much food and they think that's the best way to go about things. The problem with that is going to be if you've just spent the last couple of months really improving your strength and your muscle mass, why would you go on a diet that might leave you without a lot of fat but also without a lot of muscle? So here we have someone here who is extremely lean, has a low body fat percentage, however their muscle mass percentage is also very low. What our goal for this cut should be is to remain diced to the socks, as some people might say, ripped up, or as I like to call it, Matt Ogus style. So we want to plan accordingly going forward. So now that we know what we have to do, how do we go about doing it? What we need to establish is a baseline for our calories. Now I say baseline on this because a lot of times when you use a caloric calculator, it gives you a rough idea. It also takes into account activity level. However, no calculator can accurately measure this, so it gives us a brief idea. Through time and through application is where we really get to play around with these numbers and actually find out what our maintenance values are, as well as what our caloric deficit should be. Something to take into consideration also is proteins and fats play a huge role because these are essential things in our diet. Carbohydrates not so much. So as we go forward with planning this, proteins and fats are something that we're going to want to take into consideration. Speaking of carbs, a lot of people fear carbs on a diet. This shouldn't be the case. I'm going to talk about how you can figure out how many carbs you can have on your cutting phase. Also, something I'll address at some point is macro percentages. A lot of people who do this on a bulk like to take a split of 45% carbs, 30% proteins, and 25% fat. We'll talk about if that's an effective way to do things while on a cut. Now, let's calculate calories. In order to do this, I'm going to show you a website that I'm a big fan of. Okay, so here we have a calorie calculator. This is one from Free Dieting. I like this one a lot. I found it to be pretty accurate. So for this case, let's go ahead and fill in my information. I am 31 years old. I am 221 pounds, and I am 6'4". I don't believe that number will change anytime soon either. As far as my exercise level go, this is something you need to take into account depending on your lifestyle. For me and my purposes, I'm going to put little or no exercise or a desk job just because this is going to be easier, giving me the calories I want in making my points going forward with the rest of this presentation. Obviously, if you have a higher exercise level, you're going to need more calories throughout the day. Now, what I'm going to do from here is just hit calculate, and this is going to give me my maintenance level of calories. So, given my information and my activity level, if I were to take in that amount of calories per day, I should remain the same weight. That being said, my fat loss number here is just about 2,000 calories, and we're going to round up to 2,000 for the purposes of making this presentation easier going forward. There is also an extreme fat loss amount here. I would not suggest this as you will start to sacrifice your strength going with something like that. There's other options on here, but the only thing I really wanted to use this calculator for was, again, to get a baseline for my calories. So 2,000 is our goal. Let's go back to the presentation. Alright, so now that we have our calories figured out, I'm going to round this up to 2,000 calories per day. Are we done? And the answer to that is no, because what we need to do now is find out our essential intake for proteins and fats. So, in order to ensure that we maintain strength and maintain our body composition as far as muscle goes, there's some steps we need to take. The first of which is finding out what our protein should be. And as a general rule of thumb, I'll tell you your protein intake should be roughly about 1 gram per pound of body weight. Now, this number can fluctuate a bit. In a bulk, obviously, it's not necessary that you have 1 gram. Some people like to go higher. However, on a cut also, if you're an obese person and you weigh 400 pounds, this isn't to say you'll need 400 grams of protein. So sometimes you can go in a lower amount. The same thing with females. You don't necessarily need 1 gram per pound of body weight. Also, when determining fat levels, we should look at roughly about 1/4 of a gram per pound of body weight. Bulking is different. We'll have a video on that later. But for this purpose, we're looking at basically 1/4 of a gram per pound of body weight. You can change this a little bit, but just know that when you have very low fat levels, which some people think is beneficial in a diet or a cut, you can actually start screwing up with some of your hormones, and that's definitely something that we want to stay away from. So, let's see this in action. To do that, we'll take a look at my current stats. So I'm 6'4" and 221 pounds. Based off of the information that we've already determined, I need about 2,000 calories a day for my cut, or a 500 calorie deficit. My protein needs to be 221, which is my weight, times 1 gram per pound of body weight, so I get roughly 221 grams of protein needed per day. As far as my fat needs go, if I take my same body weight and multiply that times 1/4, so again, 1/4 of a gram per pound of body weight, I get 55.25 grams. Now going forward on this, I'll just round this down to 55 grams of fat. So, that being said, and we know our protein and fat intake, how many actual calories do we have left? Well, in order to do that, we need to know some macronutrient basics. And the basics behind this is, each gram of protein or carbohydrates is equal to 4 calories, whereas each gram of fat is equal to 9 calories. So, that being said, on my 2,000 calorie diet, if I have 221 grams of protein, I'm going to multiply that times 4, and that means my protein is taking up 884 of my available calories. The same thing with fat. If I multiply that number times 9, I get 497.25 calories. Combining them together, it means that I have 1381.25 calories taken up out of my available 2,000. So, what does this leave me? This leaves me with 618 3/4 calories left. We can then use this number to find out what our carb intake can be on this diet. And to get our carb intake in grams, we simply have to divide that number, 618, by 4. When doing that, we get 155 grams. The actual number is 154.69. However, I'm going to round up in this case since I rounded down with my fat intake. So, let's take a look at our diet totals. As of right now, we have a diet of 2,000 calories, we have 221 grams of protein, 55 grams of fat, and 155 grams of carbohydrates. Now, this being said, a lot of people are kind of taught to be afraid of carbs. There's no reason to be afraid of carbs. Carbs are something that's going to give you a great amount of energy. As you'll notice, a lot of people who go on diets tend to be very lethargic. They're tired all the time. Chances are they're just not getting enough energy or calories in because they're avoiding certain things like fat and carbohydrates. Again, the key thing to take in mind here, as long as we're having sufficient numbers of proteins and fats and are remaining in a caloric deficit, we should see weight loss over time. Now, a question I get asked all the time, what about percentages? Because a lot of times we're taught that we should follow certain percentages when bulking or on any kind of diet. Again, the most common one that I see is 45% carbs, 30% protein, and 25% fat. However, when you're on a cut, it's really going to vary depending on a person's body weight. So let's take a look at my percentages. If we take a look at my protein that I'm taking in on this diet, it's actually up to 44%. My fat percentage is 25%, whereas my carb intake is 31%. So these numbers, as far as a standard would go, are actually flip-flop with carbs and protein. Now, again, something to take into consideration, as your weight changes, your numbers will too, because remember that we base our protein and fat intake off of our actual body weight. So, in summary, what we want to take a look at here is you want to base your essential macros, your proteins and your fats off of your body weight. Don't necessarily shy away from carbs. We enjoy eating carbs, and there's a good reason to have them in your diet as far as energy goes. So don't be afraid to eat carbs. Again, the fact that we're getting enough protein and fat to have our body function as it should, we can then fill in this extra available calories that we have available to us and still remain in a caloric deficit, thus still losing weight over time. Again, the key here is we want to lose fat, but we don't want to lose muscle. So again, take that into consideration when you're planning out your diet and your cut. You want to remain in a caloric deficit. Besides the protein and fat intake, this is the most important part of any diet. Now, for those of you in the past that have been on a diet or have been eating clean food and you just haven't been able to lose weight, the chances are very likely that you're either underestimating your activity level or you're not tracking calories sufficiently enough to get a true reading. Because again, if you're taking in less than your body needs, its only natural response is to shed weight over time. Again, you don't want to get into too big of a deficit, and a too little of a deficit will really slow this. As far as this goes, I found personally that working myself into a slower deficit, while it might not be the most expedited thing, it takes time. I've seen that my strength results have been able to remain more constant. All too often, people jump into large deficits right away, and they see tremendous amounts of strength loss, and that's obviously something we want to avoid. So hopefully this walkthrough gives you a brief idea about how you can calculate your own macros. It's actually a very simple process to do. So I hope this makes sense. I appreciate it. As always, everybody, stay big, unless you're cutting, and then stay ripped maybe.